these teams. So basically, it is those teams that are working at the point when it comes to trying to find survivors. It is the many thousands of other volunteers that are doing the heavy work of trying to clear the way for them to do their job. Paula?
I know Americans stand in awe of these rescue workers and firefighters and police, all of whom are risking their lives to assist in this effort. But what are and I know none of these folks involved will ever admit the grave dangers they're facing, but today, what is the biggest challenge they face in terms of their own personal safety?
It's the shifting debris. It is the concern about the buildings in the surrounding area that are known to be buckling. We know that the fires have weakened them severely, and that is the greatest danger. But they go about the job of digging into the ground, even though the threat may be above their heads. They are concerned about finding anyone who is alive. They are leaving it up to the other experts in the area to sort of watch over them. The tremendous strain that is building up on these rescuers is very evident as you talk to all of them. You talk to some of the first responding firefighters, and the tales that they tell you of the destruction, of the human destruction that they found, are just mind-numbing. They said that they never expected to see some of the scenes that they came across. One firefighter saying that when they initially entered one of the towers, they had to obviously go in through the lobby. What they saw goes beyond human decency to describe, but there was a tremendous number of burned victims on the ground floor. That initially surprised them. They expected to find the burned victims up where the two planes impacted. Instead, what they found was that the fuel and the fire from those aircraft immediately dumped down the elevator shafts and exploded into the lobbies. That's the sort of thing they're up against, Paula.
Cannot even imagine of what they face. Martin Savage, thanks so much for that update. We're going to come back to you a little bit later on this morning. Joining me right here, north of where Martin was just talking from, is Ron Saladino, who works for Solomon Smith Barney.
Yes.
Welcome. Tell us where you were when both of the World Trade Centers were struck.
I was on the 28th floor of number 7 World Trade, working in the southeastern corner.
Okay, now for folks who aren't familiar with New York, building number 7, or number 7, was in fact the building that collapsed much later in the day.
Yes, around 6 yesterday evening.
Did you see either one of these planes slamming into the North Tower or South Tower?
No, I didn't see any of the planes.
What did you hear?
At around 8:40, you heard a tremendous explosion, followed by what felt like an earthquake rumble. After that, immediately we looked towards the southern window and saw debris of building parts, glass, and metal shattered to the ground.
And what'd you do?
First I was stunned. I didn't know what to do. I had maybe one breath of air in the whole action. Dashed to the window, looked up, and saw a hole as wide as the World Trade Center, about 20 to 30 stories high, with flames pouring out of every end.
Everybody has had a different description of then, how they reacted to that. Do you think you were doomed?
At that point, I didn't know what to think. I was scared for my life. It's something you hear about in other countries, but you don't really know what it feels like till it actually happens, in the city you work and the building right next to yours.
So tell us what happened from that point on.
From that point on, everyone seemed to be in awe, just staring at the giant hole in the Northern World Trade Center. We seemed to see bodies fly out of the window minute after minute in free fall, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 seconds down to the death at the bottom.
Some of those folks were jumping from the windows because they were trapped. Some of them just forced out by the pressure of the explosion.
Mm-hmm.
So you're watching this from the window. You're
absolutely
not thinking, I'm going to get out of this building because this building, if one of these other ones collapses, is going to be a gon or two.
Mm-hmm. At first,
are you surprised that you stood there and watched this thing rather than say, hey, I'm getting out of here?
Well, looking back at it now, it was just a blur in my memory. Eventually someone did say, let's evacuate and let's get downstairs. And initially, once that clicked in my head, I knew to, run to the stairs and run downstairs as quickly as possible.
How long did it take you to get out of your building?
About 2 minutes. I must have ran down the stairs as fast as possible.
Yeah, we need to explain, that building was only how many stories?
48, I think, in total, maybe 47.
Say only. I mean, that's a massive building by anybody's standards anywhere else in the United States. But the other buildings dwarfed it. They were 107 stories. The most remarkable thing is hearing some of your colleagues across the street describing trying to get out of the North Tower and it taking over an hour to get out.
Yes.
Once you got to the street, what happened? Were you pelted with flying debris?
Well, initially when I got down to the ground floor, the second plane had hit the Southern World Trade Center. And again, people started to panic, people started to cry, people started to get away from the front lobby windows. After that, security guards then pushed people down the escalator, around the back entrance, and up towards Greenwich Street, getting people as north as possible away from the incident.
And once again, a lot of folks might not be familiar with the geography of the city, but once you arrived at Greenwich Street, which is not too far from there, did you see either one of the buildings collapse?
Yes, I did. About 10 to 20 blocks up, I stopped to catch my breath. I turned and looked around. The Southern World Trade Center began to just buckle, about 50 consecutive bangs, and it fell down like a waterfall. And after that, there was chaos in the streets. People didn't know what to believe.
Were people screaming? What were they doing?
People were crying. People were saying the city's under attack. People were mentioning that the Pentagon got hit by a plane also. I mean, that's when I almost started to get really upset.
You know what is fascinating to me is one of our previous guests was describing trying to get out from the midsection of the North Tower, and he said people were quite orderly. I mean, some of whom had been through the '93 World Trade Center bombing. That there was not a sense of panic until they got to the lower floors. And Martin Savage was just reporting about all the kerosene that firefighters were surprised to burn a number of victims on the lower floors, but they were inundated with water. A lot of the sprinklers had gone on the building, and that was the point at which I think people realized they were in trouble. Martin, I'm going to ask you to assist me here. This is really quite stunning to share with folks that are joining us right now. These are pieces of paper from Cantor Fitzgerald, which I'm going to have you hold this from the brokerage firm. Singed, I don't know if the camera could pick this up, but singed pieces of paper that were blown out of the wreckage of the World Trade Center. And these actually showed up in the yard of one of our correspondents, Peter Stiles, I am told out in Brooklyn. So this stuff ended up miles and miles away. What do you know about the safety of any of your friends that have worked in the other two buildings? Are you missing friends at this point, missing colleagues?
As of now, I had no friends or coworkers who worked in number 1 and 2. There actually was an individual who worked on my floor that was hurt. He actually fell and broke his leg, but I found out that he's safe and okay with family and friends. So everyone else who I know of is safe.
You're a very lucky man, and I hope that ultimately you can erase some of these horrific images that you've shared with us this morning. Thank you, Ron Saladino.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time. Time to go back to Atlanta. Miles is standing by with some more news.
All right, thank you very much, Paula. Let's turn our sights on Washington for a little bit. The U.S. Capitol. Minority Leader Dick Gephardt is standing by to talk a little bit about what's ahead in Congress as the discussion shifts to some tough talk, the possibility of retaliation. Thanks for being with us, Mr. Gephardt.
Thank you.
All right, first of all, give us a sense of the debate over any sort of resolution and the wording of a resolution. I hesitate to call it a declaration of war. I presume you would too. What would you call it?
Well, I think it's an authorization for the president to do what is necessary to both find and punish the perpetrators of this violence and to try to prevent other acts from happening in the future. The president is asking for authority, and I think the president will get proper authority. We're going to be talking to his people today about how to word it properly, but I think it is needed and it will be done.
These are the sorts of occasions when partisan rancor is put to the side, but nevertheless, there are some people who, with good intentions, could have some debate about how to phrase this resolution. What are the substantive issues which may divide the parties on this?
Well, there are all kinds of arcane issues about how to word it, but essentially I don't think it's going to be a problem. Look, this was the worst violence on our soil by a foreign influence or power in the history of the country. This is worse than Pearl Harbor. This country is united today. The Congress is united. There is no air or light between Democrats and Republicans, between the Congress and the president. We want to respond. This was an act against humanity, against civilization, against all Americans. And America, as it always has, will respond. We are moved by what the heroic, patriotic people are doing, sifting through this wreckage, trying to find people. We have all kinds of reports of heroism and courage, and America will stand behind our people and stand behind the entire world order.
You know, you mentioned a foreign power is the cause of it. You would have to go back to the Civil War to find greater loss of life on the U.S. soil, which leads one to believe, of course, if we can recover from the Civil War, we can well recover from this. Let's talk about short term for just a moment. There is talk of an emergency spending resolution. perhaps on the order of $20 billion. This comes right on the heels of a discussion about the budget and some concerns about tapping into Social Security, for example. Is there some concern that this whole issue might change the whole tenor of a budget discussion in the future?
Well, I really think this is a special exception. This is a national emergency. This is a national crisis. And we cannot worry about what the budgetary costs. We have to get this done. So I think Congress will put this to the side, will say this is not in the normal budgetary debate or discussion, and we're going to do what needs to be done. Again, there is unity in this country, in the Congress, and among the people of our country. Just as after Pearl Harbor, we stood together and fought a common enemy, that's what we're going to do at this time.
Looking back on your congressional tenure, perhaps the only parallel would be the Persian Gulf War. Can you compare the tone of the times then and the rhetoric then to today? Is there any substantive difference, or do you see it as very similar?
Well, I think it is different. I think the amount of unity from the outset is greater. We had a real discussion and a legitimate debate before the Persian Gulf War. There were those of us who were willing to use force, but we didn't think that was the right time to go at it. And we wanted to use diplomatic measures to try to achieve the end. So there was a difference of opinion. After we voted and the Congress decided to use force, there was absolutely no dissent. We stood shoulder to shoulder. But that's where we are now at the outset. There is no real criticism of moving forward, of finding the people who perpetrated this, trying to prevent it from ever happening again, and finding and bringing to justice the people who perpetrated this atrocity.
The House Minority Leader is Richard Gephardt. Thank you very much for sharing some time with us this morning.
Thank you.
Paula.
All right, Miles, I'm back here in New York City, and joining me now is Pat Probert, that is, who is joining us from Toronto this morning. Thank you, sir, for being with us. Pat, this is one of the more bizarre stories I've heard to come out of this. Explain to us your, in any way, attachment to this World Trade Center disaster. I understand you got a very strange email?
No, it was actually a call on my pager last night at 10:12 p.m. I went to bed about 9:45, listening to some of the news, and kind of fell asleep. And about 10:30, turned my TV off, and then heard my pager going off, and thought it was my brother Joe calling from Vancouver, as he did the night before at home. And I thought maybe instead of him calling tonight, being last night, he may have just paged me to call him back the next day. I called in, I heard this message, and it says, you know, we're under the rubble, we are okay, and it went on and then just ended. And I tried to go back to sleep, couldn't sleep. I got up, I listened to it 2-3 more times, tried to sleep again, I couldn't. I phoned the police. I waited for them to answer their phones. I guess they were busy. I didn't call on the 911 line. So I hung up and went back to sleep. I still couldn't sleep, and I listened to it again. I phoned the Metro Toronto Police, got through to them, spoke to a sergeant at headquarters. He listened to it, others listened to it. They sent police officers to my home last night to hear the tape, and they reviewed it. And he was on the line immediately with AT&T in the United States to try and track the phone number that came back to my pager last night. And you know, it was obviously very, very distressful and very, very sad and disturbing. It's been a long, long night for me.
I can't even begin to understand what that must have been like. Pat, for our viewers to get a better sense of why this was so disturbing, I think we're able now to play part of that message that was transmitted to you. Let's listen.
We're still alive. There's no trapped on the rumble app, but we're still alive. There's no.
Pat, about the only thing I could make out, because the sound was a little distorted, is I'm still alive, I'm still alive.
Yes, we are trapped under the rebel, and then he goes to we are still alive, and then goes on from that point. He sounded very calm, cool.